102 FM. Game On's Fantasy Football.
Yes, you're very welcome along to the Game On Fantasy Football podcast. I'm glad to say I am joined in studio by Phil McGrath, Fantasy Premier League Transfers.com, and my Cian Tracy, who is down in Limerick. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, good say. And Phil?
Good evening.
Yes, indeed. Great to have you both along. Let's run down very quickly through Game Week 14. It was that sneaky little game week, Tuesday and Wednesday. Crystal Palace 1-0 winners over West Ham on the Tuesday. Everything else happened last night, which was Wednesday. Arsenal 2-0 winners over Hull City. Nicholas Bentner. Anyone got any Nicholas Bentner points? We want to hear about that.
You want to see, there was a tweet put out. There was when the Arsenal lineup was named and Bentner was in it. There was a tweet put out. Some guy on Twitter basically said, if Bentner scores, I'll toothpaste my mother's eyebrows.
Lovely.
Bentner scored, and he actually did it. In fairness to him, there was a picture put up on Twitter about 10 o'clock that night of his mother asleep in bed with toothpaste all over her eyebrows. Fair play to him for follow through.
Lovely. Liverpool 5-1 winners over Norwich. Luis Suarez, we're going to talk a lot more about him throughout the pod. 4 goals for him. Raheem Sterling with the other one. And of course Johnson on the score sheet for Norwich, but it was a good goal, but it didn't really matter.
No.
Manchester United 0, Everton 1. Massive result for the Everton fans.
Yeah, and no great surprise. That's the truth of it.
And they did very well. It was a good game and a good winner by Brian
I thought
Evier.
they were a little unfair on Everton. When you watch the highlights, it makes it look like United had all the possession and all the chances and that Everton stole the victory, and that certainly wasn't the case.
All right. And that's from a Manchester United fan,
Yeah.
so that's honesty. Southampton 2, Aston Villa 3. Not a bad game in the end. Goals scored by Rodriguez and Osvaldo for Southampton, and Delph, Agbonlahor and Kozak on the score sheet for Aston Villa. 0-0 between Stoke City and Cardiff City.
Take the clean sheets and run.
I suppose they will. Both managers will be happy with that. Sunderland 3, Chelsea 4. No one would have predicted that, but what a game. It was fabulous stuff.
According to Jose, it was Chelsea's best performance of the year.
Yeah, he did say that. Swansea 3-0 winners over Newcastle United.
Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, well, it was a strange one, all right. And Shelvey was in interesting form last night. Brilliant on the football pitch, but his temper, you think he's sort of solved a couple of his problems, but
Not so.
not so. He's still a great footballer, though. Hopefully he can get his temperament together.
He's still young.
Fulham 1, Tottenham Hotspur 2. A result which helped my account in my bookies balance. Not the bookies account, obviously my account it helped. West Brom 2, Manchester City 3.
2 late goals from West Brom gave City a bit of a scare.
It did, and that was the other part of my double last night. So anyway, I was happy for those.
Happy camper.
That's it. And again, Toure has to be mentioned from that game.
Yeah.
Terrific performance from him. And he got 2 goals. Aguero got 1. And Zabaleta with the old assist. Kolarov with 2 assists. So it's good scoring from the back there. Right, that was Game Week 14. Now it is time to talk about something that's much more relevant. It's happened now. It's Game Week 15. Happy with those sting levels, yeah?
Yeah, they were a little low last week.
They were a little low. They were a little bit annoying. Keane, you happy with that level of sting?
Sounds good, my end.
Yeah, we just try it again. Yes.
Now you can hear
There you
it.
have it. Right, all right. Sorry about the stings last week. Right, let us talk about Game Week 15. Phil, 3 focus games. The first one is...
I think the first place we'll start is Southampton against Manchester City. A couple of reasons, I suppose. One is my concern for Southampton, and the second being Manchester City picked up a win on the road. So we'll see how this one works out. But I mean, the Saints are in a little bit of a rut. 3 defeats, 2 wins and a draw in the last 6. They've scored 13 goals in 7 home games. I conceded 5 now at home this season with 4 clean sheets. Points to note: Artur Boric has broken his hand. We're unsure as of yet as to how long he will be out, but I'd imagine we're looking at a
5 or 6 weeks.
At a minimum of 6 weeks. And Southampton have now lost 3 successive league games for the first time under Pochettino. So it'll be interesting to see how they will come back from that. And they've also conceded 2+ goals in 3 successive Premier League games. having only conceded 5 goals in their opening 11. So it just goes to show the tide may be turning for the Saints, and fantasy managers may need to start readjusting to that. City, on the other hand, picked up a win on the road last week, like we said, against West Brom. They've now got 4 wins and 2 defeats in the last 6. Those 2 defeats, of course, did come on the road. They've knocked up 11 goals in 7 away games, which is some way behind their 29 goals scored at home, but still not too bad. They are conceding on the road, though. They've conceded 12 so far in 7 away games, with only 1 clean sheet. Yaya Toure, like Andrew said at the top of the show, he's now scored as many Premier League goals this season as he did in their winning season of 2012. And Negredo was dropped for the West Brom game, which was annoying to a good few fantasy managers, because we did speak about the fact that Negredo could be an interesting replacement for Aguero to free up some cash. But I suspect he'll be back. I think it was a case of three games in a week, that Pellegrini wanted to freshen things up a little bit. We expect him to return this week to face Southampton. And Aguero was still a man that you'd have to consider. If you don't have the budget, like I said, I think Negredo is one to look at. But with 11 goals and 8 assists this season, you'd have to fancy him.
You would. Keane, anything striking from this tie? I mean, is there any Man City players that you would think we should be looking at?
No one that hasn't been mentioned already. I mean, Aguero, Yaya Toure. I think a lot was made of Southampton's start to the season. Obviously, they did well at Old Trafford, but they did have a relatively easy, we'll say, first fixtures, and they've hit a slump in the last 3 games. But I think it had been earmarked that around this period it was going to be a real test of how good they actually were. So, I mean, they're a really good side, but I don't think they have the depth. So I think their position, you may see them falling off in the next few weeks. And in terms of fantasy football potential, they were keeping a lot of clean sheets, but I think the opposition, has to be taken into consideration, and maybe we won't see as many good returns, especially with Boric out now as well.
It's a tough job as well for the very young goalkeeper they have, because when is it? Is it
Pablo Gazzaniga? Yeah, but I
Gazzaniga,
think it's interesting though. I don't actually think that he's going to stay in goals. Kelvin Davis has been injured, and he's supposed to be back this weekend. Now, he is the usual number 2, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Kelvin Davis come into the side. I wouldn't be running out buying Gazzaniga just yet. I mean, if you were looking for a replacement for Boric, I think Davies could well be the one that might take over that slot. So that's something worth bearing in mind.
All right, I'm going to come back to that question, because I want to ask you both about a cheaper goalkeeper later on in the pod. So I might just come back to that in a little while. But it's about that time of the year where I think we might need to free up those points, those decimal places.
It's coming down to point 1 and point 2 with this part of the season. But I mean, I do worry for Southampton, and my advice generally now would be to have a look at the Southampton defenders you do hold. Klein is doubtful going into this one, a 75% chance of playing. As is Wanyama in the midfield also, and Schneiderlin is out as well, and that's a big miss for them, for him to be out. So I'd start re-evaluating and maybe looking elsewhere and having a good look at the fixtures and see where the clean sheets might come for in around the same price bracket. But I have a couple of ideas on that we'll go to later on.
All right, Keane, do you want to kick off with the second of the featured games?
Yeah, we'll have a look at Arsenal, Everton, 2 of the form teams of the league at the moment. Arsenal have only lost 1 of their last 5 wins, and Everton, they're unbeaten in their last 6. So I mean, I think we're in for a really good game at the Emirates this weekend. Plenty of goals as well in their last 7 games. Arsenal have scored 9, but Arsenal have scored 15. Everton have scored 9. Obviously, Lukaku featuring heavily there. In terms of at the back, Arsenal have been pretty impressive, only conceding 5 goals. They've kept 4 clean sheets at home this season. Much has been made of the how good a form Szczesny's been in, and with Koscielny and Mertesacker finally forming a good partnership at the back, that's something worth considering. Everton, on the other hand, have conceded 7 goals in their last 7 away games, which isn't too bad at all. They've plenty of defenders who are worth looking at, I think, for the course of the season, and they've kept 4 clean sheets away from home. So, I mean, I think we are going to be in for a tight game with 2 good footballing teams as well. I mean, they're probably 2 of the best teams to watch in the league at the moment in terms of their style of play. Ozil was back on the score sheet last night, thankfully for me and plenty of other fancy football managers, I'm sure. That was his first goal since game week 8, but he now has a goal and 2 assists in his last 2 games. Nicholas Bentner, a surprise for everyone, as you just mentioned. It had been 1,005 days since he last started a Premier League match for Arsenal. So I mean, it was nice for him to pop up with a goal, but not so nice for those of us who had Giroud, who was pretty gutted that he didn't come on at all. Arsenal have the second best conversion rate in the league at 14.3%, which is behind City, who are running away with 23%. I think on the Everton side, a lot was made when Leighton Baines got injured. You know, who are they going to put in there? They put in Brian Oviedo, who's been really, really good. He's actually classed as a midfielder in the game, and generally he is a midfielder, but he slotted in at left back, and he's played very well. But I think he's played so well because Martinez has given Coleman and Baines, when they play, so much license to get forward. So Oviedo, you know, he's been getting the returns as fancy football. The only concern is he is listed as a midfielder, and he is going to be playing at the back. Another disappointment from Everton's game this week for fancy football managers would have been Kevin Morales being dropped at Old Trafford. Deulofeu came in, who is a really, really exciting player. I mean, he's on loan from Barcelona. He joined Barcelona when he was 9. That's how much they wanted him. He's only 19 now. I mean, I think Barcelona will definitely take him back at the end of the season, and he'll be all the better for it as well. And then, of course, Lukaku. He now has 3 goals and an assist in his last 3 games, but has only scored 3 goals on the road all season, so that's probably worth bearing in mind as well.
I presume we're all not telling everyone to go and buy Deulofeu now, are we?
See, he's a striker.
5.4.
He's a striker playing the right side of midfield, but he is getting forward. He is creating chances. It is a worry though, that he is going to be rotated.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think there is a lot of rotation between the likes of Pienaar, Deulofeu, Osman, even Barkley, a couple of weeks ago. But I think that's what Martinez has been doing so well. I mean, he went in the derby, played really, really well. We're unlucky not to get the win. And then next week made a lot of changes, and they hammered Stoke, So he is finding that right balance there. And in terms of fancy football, it's almost difficult. There's only a few nailed-on starters there. So I don't know if I'd be rushing out, and the fact he's listed as a striker is a bit annoying as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if he was a midfielder, I would suggest keeping an eye on the team sheets, and if he's playing, bringing him in. But I like Keane's right. I did say last week, for fantasy managers, it is frustrating that there is that rotation at Everton. But for Everton as a club, it's great that they can make those changes, and there's no dip in performance, with a change of personnel. This one is going to be reasonably tight, but I do fancy Arsenal to win it. I can't really see anyone beating Arsenal at the moment in the form they're playing. For me, Ozil is certainly one to have a look at this week and could be an outside shout for a captain. And Romelu Lukaku's goal scoring form on the road does worry me a little bit, but you never know. Big game, big player, can step up. And in terms of Oviedo, the fact that he's not a defender means he will miss out on any clean sheet points that the team do pick up. Now, obviously, he is getting attacking returns, but let's be honest, the chances that that's going to continue every week are pretty slim. So, yes, he's had 2 good weeks, but he's not really worth bringing it in, which is an awful pity because he is a good talent.
And we're not going for an Everton clean sheet, but do you think Arsenal will hold them scoreless, Phil?
Well, if anyone has a chance in this, I think it is Arsenal. I wouldn't put my house on it, but it's possible. But I certainly have Mertesacker. I'm going to play him. I think set pieces could be part and parcel of this one, and I'd fancy him maybe if there was corner or free kick to step up and he could get his head on something, and that could be the difference in the game. It really is one of those games. It's very difficult to see, but with both sides playing some good attacking football, it's going to be either a feast or a famine.
Keane, you mentioned that very, very solid now central defensive partnership of Arsenal. And do you fancy them to keep the clean sheet?
I don't, and I'll tell you why. I think Lukaku's little spat war of words, whatever you want to call it, with Mourinho at the moment is an interesting side plot for this. Mourinho is kind of talking in the media about how he's still very young, and almost calling him naive when it was put to him about how he's scored more goals this season than any of the Chelsea strikers put together. So I think Lukaku, not that he has a point to prove, but well, he probably does actually, in fact, to Mourinho. And I think that that's really going to fire him up. It's a big game going to the league leaders. and I wouldn't put it past him to keep that run going, to be honest.
All right. Phil, third focus game, but not the least.
No, I suppose it was only fair that we leave this one to last because of one man to talk about. We'll look at Liverpool and West Ham. Liverpool are in great form. They're starting to hit top gear, I think. They're playing really, really well. They've won 3, lost 2 and drawn 1 of the last 6, but I expect those defeats to be slowly phased out over the next couple of weeks. And the Hammers, unfortunately, are on a pretty poor run. They've only won 1 of their last 6, and that win came against Fulham. Which is no great achievement, to be honest about it. Liverpool at home have scored 18 goals in 7 home games, which is, again, it's fairly good considering City are running away with it on 29. I think Liverpool are third in terms of goals scored at home this season, and they've only conceded 4 with 3 clean sheets. The Hammers, on the other hand, they've only scored 4 goals in 7 away games, kind of tells its own story, but they have been solid at the back, keeping 4 clean sheets. But let's be honest, it's the Luis Suarez show at the moment. He's reached 50 Premier League goals now in just 86 appearances. Regardless of what you think about him as a person, as a footballer, it is a pretty impressive tally, and you can't deny the man has great talent.
He's a pretty impressive footballer.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I struggled to pick out the best goal of the 4 he scored last night. For me, I think probably the free kick. I know people might disagree with me, but I actually think his free kick was probably the best. Coutinho was another man who's popped up. He disappointed us earlier on in the season. We were kind of talking him up, and he did pretty much nothing. In fact, he did nothing. But he's now produced attacking returns in his last 2 starts, and I'd fancy that to continue. And Steven Gerrard is back on the radar. He's putting in some good performances. He's now returned 3 goals and 8 assists in his last 8 games. The only blank he's had in the last 8 was against Arsenal in game week 10, so you can understand that, I suppose. And for the Hammers, the 4th lowest conversion rate in the league at 4.8%, which is away from home, that's their conversion rate, which is, I don't think their home rate's much better, to be honest. But Carlton Cole is actually their highest goal scorer against Liverpool.
And if you look at his minutes played, it's pretty funny.
It is, and I mean, just another point to note then is that Morrison is suspended, having picked up his 5th yellow card against Palace, so he's going to be out of action for this one. It's a Liverpool game week this week. I fancy them for a clean sheet, so Mignolet is one to come in. I think John Flanagan is worth a look. Paul mentioned him last week and the week before. Certainly he's cheap enough that you can bring him in for a couple of weeks while he's continuing to get his game time. He started the last 2. I think Gerrard or Coutinho are ones to look at. I think it kind of depends on budget there, despite the fact there not being too much in them. But we did say, it's coming down to that 0.1, 0.2, and then Luis Suarez all day long. This game, but last game week 14, was very much divided by the haves and have-nots, and it was if you didn't have Suarez and if you didn't captain him, you were in big trouble.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One question: always we reach a point of the season, and a couple of players sort of put their hand up and sort of say, you have to have me, or else you're dead. Luis Suarez is now firmly in that must-have camp.
Yeah, I think after his performance, he's cemented himself in there.
Can I ask you about the other players? I'll ask you both about the other players that are now must-haves, okay? So Suarez is a must-have. Is Aguero a must-have? Or is Aguero stroke Negredo a must-have?
Yeah, I think one of the two. Aguero's place is certainly not under threat from rotation at the moment. Obviously, we've seen in the midweek games that Zeko came in for Negredo, and that would have frustrated quite a few managers. But if you can't afford Aguero, I would get Negredo in, but make sure that your 3rd striker or your other 2 strikers are of good quality that you can rely on if you need to, maybe if Negredo's dropped, play 5 across the midfield and 2 up front in a particular game week. But yeah, he is. Aguero for me is really.
And just by the same, just to move into the midfield and ask you the same question, Ramsey, Yaya Toure, and Hazard, Keane, would you say the 3 of those are must-haves in the midfield? Ramsey, Yaya and Hazard?
Probably, but I don't have 2 of them, so I mean, I've had Gerrard for the last maybe 6 weeks, and he's done really, really well for me. I've sold him now this week because I felt that Aguero was just a must-have. So I've cut back on one of my fielders, got rid of Gerrard, which pained me, especially with a home game against West Ham. But yeah, I agree with Phil. I just feel now that if it's a toss-up between Gerrard and Aguero for a must-have, I think my money's better spent on Aguero. But yeah, I think you're right. I don't have Ramsey in my team because I have Ozil But I do think, I mean, for his value, I would put him in the must-have. And I think Yaya Toure is just coming to stage where he is always a must-have. I think at the back then, I think the must-have, I'm going to put Seamus Coleman in that bracket. I think he's just class player, brilliant fancy football. He returns so many points. His price is steadily increasing, but he's still not breaking the bracket. And Everton are always good for a clean sheet, and he's popped up with a couple of goals this season and assists. So I think he's a must-have.
All right, there's plenty of must-haves, and they were the three of the three focus games. We shall have best of the rest now after this lovely piece of music. Yes, we do like a bit of Liquidator. Right, let us get on with the best of the rest. I'm going to start with Manchester United and Newcastle, where they're Keane or Phil like it or not. Don't know who we're going to play. I have Rooney. He's suspended. That's probably the big Manchester United news.
It's big news for United because Van Persie's still struggling with his groin injury. Rooney's suspended, having picked up his 5th yellow. So the big, obviously, I mean, looking at it, it's going to have to be Welbeck and Hernandez. Now, I think Hernandez could be a sneaky show for this one. I don't think he's a long-term prospect because he is a rotation risk, but certainly if you were looking for the differential going into this week, I think he'd be one to have a look at. I don't fancy Newcastle for the clean sheet, but United aren't scoring. And that's a big problem. Sunderland have scored more goals at home than United have scored at home.
That says a lot.
That does say a lot, and United have already lost more league games this season than they did in their title-winning seasons of 98, 99 or 99, 2000, which kind of, again, tells its own story. I don't fancy clean sheets in this one. I think Everton exposed United. It was far too easy for Everton to get through, not to take away from the performance, but it was 1-2 passes. They were in around the back, and probably, Everton could have had 2, maybe even 3. And I think that's certainly a concern. I think Remy is one to look at, and Kabaye normally pulls out a barnstormer performance against United. He's done it the last couple of seasons. He just pulls it out of a hat, and for me, they'd be the two to look at Newcastle. For United, it's Hernandez is the outside shout. I don't fancy anything in the United midfield.
Hey, Gringo, get your boots.
Yeah, and the defenders I don't fancy for clean sheet. Now, Evra is still proven that he can get attacking returns. He probably should have scored against Everton and didn't, but he will be also one to consider, but not so much for the clean sheet, more on attacking side of things.
It is an interesting one. Keane, how do you see this one? I mean, not a whole lot of hope for Manchester United.
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot. I wouldn't see a lot of fancy football returns either. I mean, I'd be more hopeful of Van Persie returning than anything else. I think he was touch and go for the Everton game, but he was decided not to risk him. And with Rooney suspended now, I think that might force David Moyes' hand a bit this weekend, because United losing back-to-back again is just unthinkable, really. So, I mean, I think it's probably worth checking back on the site maybe tomorrow or something, when we might have a bit more news on Van Persie. But, I mean, I'd be hopeful that he might return. But I think Phil's right. Hernandez could be a cheeky outsider, because I think United, we have to see, a comeback from them, and I'd be surprised if we didn't.
And Phil has to be right every now and again, Keane, as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Broken clock is right.
One in 10 has to go, right?
It's a numbers game, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And on the Newcastle side, well, we mentioned
Kabaye and Remy are ones to consider.
Yeah. And Newcastle coming off the back of their first defeat in a while.
Yeah, first defeat in 4 for them.
Yeah.
Surprised at that, but I think this game will have goals in it. It normally does. They'd be the two.
It's usually 4-3 to somebody.
Yeah, there's normally a few goals.
Yeah. If
around.
Paul was here, he could tell us, what the score was in 1984.
Well, yeah,
but he's not. No.
Not.
Right. Let us move on. Next best of the rest. Crystal Palace and Cardiff City.
Yeah, this is one that I was kind of touched upon earlier on about the looking at Southampton defenders and maybe making a switch. Tony Pulis seems to have put his magic touch to the Palace defence, like he did at Stoke. And after a clean sheet last time out, I'd fancy them to pick up another one this week. They've kept 3 clean sheets in the last 4. Now, I know that kind of goes back before Pulis' time, but I'd fancy them against Cardiff.
Well, they have to be targeting this game for 3 points.
Oh, without a doubt. Both sides will.
Yeah.
But I fancy Palace at home. Pulis will have them well drilled. They're starting to hold their shape a lot better, and that's why we're seeing some more clean sheets coming in. and against Cardiff, who are still struggling for goals away from home. We know their home performances have been epic. Is probably the best way to put it. But I do fancy Palace for a clean sheet. So Danny Gabadon for me will be one to have a look at there as a defender. And I'd even go as far as saying if you wanted a cheap replacement for Boric until he's back fit, Julian Speroni at 4.5 million could be one to have a good look at.
Okay, we're going to come back to those cheaper keepers in a minute. Keane, Crystal Palace or Cardiff City for you?
Yeah, I agree with Phil. I'd even be looking further up the field. I think that they have a lot of very good value for squad players in their side. Gabidon, I think at 4.1 million is definitely worth a look. Barry Bannon at 4.4. He's got 2 goals and 3 assists in his last 4 games. I think he's an excellent squad player to have, and I think this weekend he could do very well. And I know Paul mentioned it on the pod during the week, and he actually came up trumps Marouane Chamakh. I think I mentioned at the start of the season on one of our YouTube hangouts and he all laughed at me. But
yes, we did. I remember it well.
And in fairness, he hasn't done well so far. But I don't know. I think Pulis coming in might hopefully give a new lease of life to everyone. And you know, Shamak took his goal well last night. A nice little header. But at 4.7 million, I suppose as we're talking about the finer details, the finer numbers. 4.7 million. If you are going for 2 big hitters, you might need, you know, a cheaper third striker who is going to play every week. And Shamak certainly fits that bill. And against Cardiff this weekend, you wouldn't back him scoring. I wouldn't back him scoring against him for 2 games in a row.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I don't mean to pigeonhole Tony Pulis, but the style that we've seen from his teams has been very much solid at the back and long balls forward. You know, I don't think that's any disrespect to the man. That's just the way he sets out his sides, and that kind of play will certainly suit Shamak. You know, he is good in the air, as we saw last week. He is well able to hold the ball up, and Keane's right. We could see a bit more from him. Whether I'm going to go and shell out the cash from, not yet, but Keane's right. If you need a cheap third striker to facilitate the likes of having Aguero and Suarez in your side, you could do a lot worse.
All right. I know we're going to come back to. Well, I'm going to talk about Marshall, the goalkeeper, when we are talking about goalkeepers in a minute. On the Cardiff side of things, Whittingham is an ever-present favourite in the midfield. 5.1, takes all the set pieces. Other than that, Fraser Campbell up front has looked lively.
Yeah, when he's got a chance, he is a bit of a rotation risk also. So I wouldn't be overly keen on bringing him in. But I think Whittingham is probably
could be a scoreless draw. Could be, and
I don't think it will be, because both sides could do it winning this one. Palace more so than Cardiff, and I think they will go gun ho at it and look to get the result. You know, I don't think there'll be any shame in losing it once you have a go.
Ben Turner played amazingly the other night for Cardiff. I have him as well. I was very, very impressed with him. He got the clean sheet. He also got a yellow card, but he was a rock in the back for
I
them.
had Cocker in there now, and he picked up 2 bonus points for me as well. And it's not the first time this
I was
season
annoyed
he's
that because I thought actually Turner played better than Cocker, and
Cocker's actually picked up 11 bonus points so far this season, which is pretty impressive. But that's the new bonus point system we spoke about at the start of the season. It does tend to favour defenders slightly more than it has done in previous years.
All right, let us move on. And what about Stoke City and Chelsea? It's an interesting one, really.
Yeah, there's not too much at Stoke that's standing out for me at the moment.
There's nothing at Stoke.
No. Not particularly, no. And Oscar being out seems to suit Hazard. He had a very good game against Sunderland, and I think he's certainly one to be looking at. The fact that he is now the main man in the midfield.
He doesn't do it every game, but when he does do it every second game, he actually earns enough points to cover the previous game where he's done nothing at.
It evens itself.
It's very frustrating.
It is a little bit frustrating that he can't sort of put them all together.
But I'd fancy Chelsea for a clean sheet in this one. John Terry be the one obvious standout. He scores more goals than any other defender. So you get a bit of both from him. And Hazard for me is also another one to look at there.
A bit of both from John Terry.
What about Lampard? I mean, he's 7.6 million. He's only selected by 9.1% of managers. Cheeky differential possibly. I mean, he's picked up 32 points in his last 3 game weeks.
Yeah,
I think he's worth considering. It's strange. Like a few seasons ago, you know, he would have been a nailed on, and he's gone so cheap now. He's in like that Ramsey sort of bracket. But if you didn't have the money for your Hazard or your Oscar, I think he's worth a look. But I think Chelsea are hopeful to have Oscar back this weekend, so it'll be interesting to see if Mourinho puts him back in the side, because he did single Mata out for praise. Now, I didn't think he was anything special. He was obviously outplayed and outshone by Hazard, but it'll be interesting to see if Mata can keep his place in the team.
All right, always interesting to see how that Chelsea midfield gets resolved. It's revolved. It's another one of those teams that it's always difficult to trust Jose to actually pick your man. Moving on, West Brom and Norwich doesn't seem to be the best game on paper. However, I think there are fantasy football points here, probably for West Brom defenders.
Yeah, clean sheet in this one for me. It'd be well worth to go. I think Macaulay is probably the standout one from West Brom to be having a look at. As we've seen over not only this season but previous seasons, he does have a habit of popping up with goals every once in a while. He's 2 so far this season and an assist, and a 5.5 million. He'd be the one for me. And certainly if you did need a keeper to come in, Bowes Myhill could be one at 4.5 also to have a look at. There's an argument for Sessegnon. We spoke about it last week or the week before, and Paul kind of said, "Listen, it's probably time to forget Sessegnon." I'm starting to think he could be right, as Keane sniggers.
About a year too late, Keane.
Yeah, but listen, he could still pop up and do something this week.
Not the sniggering, just your choice.
My choice, yeah. He could still pop up and do something this week, but while we were talking about frustration, that's probably the biggest one. For me, yeah, I'd fancy West Brom. I wouldn't be bringing anyone else in because long term I don't think it's worth it, but certainly clean sheets at the back are one to consider, and Norwich are woeful. All
right, I'm presuming you're in full agreement with that, Keane. As we move on to Sunderland and Spurs, this is an interesting one. I suppose it's interesting because whatever Gus Poyet is doing at Sunderland is working. Now, I know they haven't got any points on the board really as yet, but I know they've had a tough run of games. Results haven't gone their way, but they are playing really well. And I have to say, I'd be very hopeful, Keane, that they're not going to stay in trouble for too much longer if they keep pulling out performances like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in January, because obviously that's not really Gus Poyet's team. The amount of players they brought in and stuff, he still hasn't really put his own stamp on the side. He has brought back the likes of Cattermole and Bardsley back into the side, but it'll just be interesting to see over the New Year period what he does with the team. But in terms of fancy football, to be honest, I wouldn't really be going near this game. I just wouldn't trust either side. You just don't know what you're going to get with them. Spurs blowing hot and cold, Sunderland kind of the same, and I don't think I'd be bringing in anyone. I don't have anyone from either side, and I don't think I'll be bringing anyone in either. Yeah,
no, I'm exactly the same.
Snap.
There's nothing. Not long, again, the long-term game, and certainly looking towards Christmas, the hectic schedule, you want to try and maybe reduce the amount of transfers you'll need to make, because because of the amount of games that come up so quick and so fast, players are going to pick up injuries, and it's kind of wise to hang, if looking at them at that point of view, that your transfers could be more valuable elsewhere rather than shipping out a Sunderland or Tottenham player who's not performing.
By the same logic, Fulham and Aston Villa, for the same logic, looks pretty similar.
Yeah, I thought Fulham were fairly impressive.
They were
in midweek.
They were super
without them.
They have another one now. Another Dutch fella.
At
least the action is fine. They don't have to do too much.
Muller's saying it's going to take him a while to put his own stamp on it. I thought Berbatov played fairly well, but he's not one you're going to be considering. Villa, on the other hand, they there is, looking at the likes of like Bon Lahore, he scored a good goal the weekend. Benteke obviously has been extremely off the boil over the last couple of weeks. That's his worst ever run in the Premier League, 7 games without a goal. So I wouldn't be fancying again. This one, there's not too much in it for me this week that I'd really be looking at. Certainly if I had a Villa striker, however, I would play them. I wouldn't be too worried, but I wouldn't be bringing anyone in.
Swansea, have they turned the corner? 3-0 at home. Hull City, the visitors now.
Well, this one I would have said before the midweek games could go either way. Now I think after the display midweek we could see Swansea pinch this one, and there's only one player at the moment for me at Swansea worth looking at, and that's John Joe Shelby.
Yeah, he's a great player. He really is.
It's the Europa League curse, I reckon.
Yeah, well, you Keane knows better than most. Keane wrote a very good piece on the site last week about the Europa League course. And for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, I do suggest you hit fantasypremierleaguetransfers.com and have a look at that. It is the course of the Europa League. They're very poor after that, but they are used to playing now 3 games within the space of 7 days, which will stand to them well over this period. And that's something Paul spoke about last week, is that teams who aren't used to a quick turnaround in games will suffer over this festive period, whereas teams who are used to it will be able to stand up to the punishment a little bit more, and we should see more from them. So I would fancy Swansea in this one, but the only person for me, like I said, would be Shelby.
A clean sheet as well, maybe. I don't really fancy Hull to score. I think Ashley Williams at 4.8 million is probably the best value. I think it's worth pointing out as well that there was an update about Mishu today, and Laudrup has said, I quote, "Let's say he could be back for Monday, but he will definitely not be match fit." So, I mean, that's good news for Swansea heading into a busy Christmas period, because Mishu hasn't quite hit the heights that he did last season. But if he gets back fit over the Christmas, I'll certainly be keeping an eye on him anyway. He's an old favourite of mine.
Yeah, I mean, and even looking at Swansea's fixtures, it's Hull this week, and then they've got Norwich. There's 2 games. Even if you were bringing the likes of Shelby in or a Swansea defender, you could see them picking up points over the next 2 weeks. After that, though, it's Everton, Chelsea, Villa, City, United, Tottenham. Might be time to drop them again.
All right. That was best of the rest. Another nice bit of music now, and we'll be doing Captain's Pick shortly. That was very short indeed. Phil, make it easy. Luis Suarez.
Yeah, all day long.
Yeah?
All day long. If you don't have Suarez...
Have you just brought him in?
Oh, no, I have Suarez. Oh, do I have to go back through my transfer history? I have him a good while now.
Okay. I believe you.
But if you don't have Suarez, you're missing out, and that's clear after last week. A 48-point captain shout if you had him. Outside of that, I think Hazard is one to look at this weekend. I'd expect some good stuff from him, despite the fact that Chelsea are away to Stoke. And one that many people probably won't agree with me with, but I think Mesut Ozil against Everton could be the deciding factor in that game. It's a big game. He's a big player. He's used to high pressure games. When you think about
It's only about 5'10".
the games that he's played in while at Madrid. So I'd fancy him to do well, and Hazard if you don't have Suarez, and even Aguero comes into that mix. But I'm still a little bit wary of Man City on the road.
Keane, before I give my apart from Luis Suarez, where are you going for captains?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to try and pull the wool over your eyes. It has to be Suarez, but I think if you don't have him in your side, as Phil says, it's like Van Persie last season. You have to. I mean, you've missed out for long enough now, and now is the time with a busy Christmas period. Liverpool don't have any European football, anything like that. They're concentrating is on the league, and you have to just splash the cash and get him in. I think Aguero is worth a look, but I mean Suarez will be the first choice. But I think if Van Persie is fit, I think he'd be worth a shout. All
right. Yeah, I brought Suarez in last night. I've resisted the urge to bring him in until then. Then I panicked watching Match of the Day, and I could see the 12.4 price tag go, and I went, no, quick. So I reorganised the team last night.
See, if you did on that last week when you were told, you would have had 48 points.
Shut up. I know I would have had 48, but that's if I'd captained him. Anyway, I have him now. I'm going to captain him this week. I'm going to give the vice captaincy to Ramsey, only because I don't have Ozil. And I think against Everton at home, the Arsenal midfield are going to need to be on their game, and hopefully Ramsey will come up trumps. But Suarez is going to score 4 or 5 probably against West Ham, so we should be all right. That captain's picks, enough out of it. Right. Before we do anything else, a cheap goalkeeper. All right, just for the purposes of before we get into the questions.
This for you? This is for you.
This is my question.
So, all the advice you ask us for throughout the season.
Yeah.
This one is for you, but you are going to take it.
I'm going to ask. I'm going to,
You're going to take it, and if the answer I give you agrees with what you're thinking, you'll go with it. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Right. I've got 2 goalkeepers, like most people. It's the way the game works. Right, and from the start, I've had Mignolet and Burridge from the start.
As had I.
Yeah, and in all fairness, they serve me well. But now I've reached a stage where eventually I'm going to leave Mignolet there for the moment. I'm not in a hurry to get rid of him. I might swap him for Howard, who's the same price, 5.6 at some point, or Chesney for Arsenal, also 5.6. That's not my question today. My question today is Burridge is 4.7 when I bought him. He's up to 5 now. So I want to free up some of that money. I rarely play him. I rarely play that second. So I'm looking for someone in and around the 4 mark. I want to free up a couple of decimal. Are there any clever sort of 4s?
I'm sure they're all very clever, but in terms of fantasy points, Marshall at 4.6 is probably your best option, simply because he will play week in, week out. Cardiff are going to concede attempts on goals. He will get extra points for saves. He's 4 clean sheets this season, which isn't a bad return for a newly promoted side so far, with only 14 game weeks gone. Outside of him,
Alan McGregor in Hull?
Yeah, Vito Minone, Andrew, is, I think, worth a look. He's only 4.2, and Westwood got injured there a few weeks ago, and the former Arsenal shot stopper has played the last 4 games. He's only 4.2 million. I mean, if you want a squad goalkeeper who's going to play, he could be your man, 4.2.
I was having a look. Kieran Westwood he's due back for this Saturday. I know he's still red, but he is due back this week. So
I think Minone will continue. He's 2 clean sheets in the 4 games he's played. So I mean, why?
There's not much really between them.
No, and if it's not broke, you don't fix it.
All right, okay. So well, there's
the other one is possibly Boaz Myhill at West Brom, but that one's a little bit riskier, I think, but it's an option.
All right, well, I'll keep an eye on Vito. Thank you for the advice. Any questions coming into fantasypremierleaguetransfers.com? They do come in every week, plenty of them.
Yeah, we got a good few in with some screenshots of people looking for some advice. So I've singled out 2 here for some preferential treatment. The first one came in on Twitter from one Paulie.
Yes.
So Paul, I assume.
Yes.
And it's not our Paul.
No, he's another Limerick man, Keane. By the way, one Paulie. At one Paulie, you can find him on Twitter.
We have to help him out. So
yeah. What I'll do is I'll pop up the picture of the screenshot on the podcast post on the site, so people can actually take a look at the team while we're reviewing it. But I'll just give you a quick run through now.
And I have retweeted it from the @GameOn2FM Twitter account.
There you go, you can check it out there. But very quickly, for those of you who aren't near a computer to see the screenshot, it is Cech, Toure, Ivanovic, Zabaleta, Barkley, Townsend, Oscar, Yaya Toure, Ramsey, Suarez, Lukaku, and on his bench he has Boric, Vyman, Fonte and Distan. Not too bad. His midfield is probably the most worrying part. Straight away he gets points because he has Suarez. So that's not so bad. Midfield, Oscar is injured now. We are expecting him to come back reasonably soon. But what does worry me more so is the fact that he's Barkley and Townsend, who are both rotation risks. Now, there's 2 ways you can look at this. You can leave Oscar until he comes back and he's fit, or you could make a switch to Hazard. Now, I'm kind of basing this on making the switch to Hazard just in case Oscar doesn't play this week and he wants to make that change straight away. So what I'd probably look at doing is taking out Townsend and Barkley. That'd give you, I don't know what he has in his bank, you see, so I'm roughly basing this on the fact that he's no money in his bank.
He's from Limerick.
Chances are there's no money in the bank,
like
everyone else's bank account. That's not just a Limerick problem. So he'd have 11 million to spend on 2 midfielders if he sold.
Did you note though Keane didn't laugh at all there?
No
comment.
No comment. He's got to live down there.
Yeah.
But if you sell Oscar, you're going to need to find 0.6 of a million to bring in Hazard. So you'd have to sell Townsend and Barkley, which would give you, say, 11 million to spend on 2 midfielders. So Barry Bannon would be one that Keane's already mentioned at 4.4 to bring in, and John Joe Shelby will be the other to bring in, and John Joe is at 5.3. And if we take away the 0.6 that you're going to need then to bring in Hazard, it should leave you with 0.7 in the bank to make changes elsewhere over Christmas. I'd probably look at changing Vyman or even Yai or Kolo Toure At the back, he's rotation risk there as well. But outside of that, you're not so bad. You've got Cech in goal, so he can kind of stand in for Boric.
I think doubling up though on Chelsea defender, like with Cech and Ivanovic, isn't most ideal. Like Cech is an expensive goalie, Ivanovic is an expensive defender. I think you could downsize one of them, and that would also free up cash. Well, I mean, we've spoken at length on site and on podcasts about how it is a bit risky doubling up, especially on more expensive players.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's another point that'll have, he needs to consider. It is a tough one to call, but yeah, I think the money in the back line, even Zabaleta isn't that cheap. He doesn't really have any cheap defenders, the likes of your Cockers or Macaulay's or Shaw or any of those. So maybe they'd be ones to look at. But in terms of the midfield, I think he needs to make up some ground. He needs some points. I would be looking at Chip and Barkley and Townsend out, because if neither of those play in a week where you've started them, you're reducing yourself down to 3 midfielders, and you're struggling from that point.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, so hopefully that has helped him out. And the other one we got in was from Marvin Hawley, and that was also on Twitter. He sent that in to us at Fantasy Prem Tips on Twitter. And again, I'll pop up a screenshot of Marvin's team, but just to give you a quick run through, it's Chesney in goal with Collins of West Ham, Macaulay, Gabadon, Klein. Midfield of Sessegnon, Nasri, Oscar, Ozil, Giroud and Suarez up front, and on his bench he has Marshall, who we just spoke about, Rosner of Hull, Rooney and Morrison. Now Rooney and Morrison are both suspended until game week 16.
That's why they're on the bench.
Obviously, I wouldn't be selling them. That's grand. You can leave them there. They'll come back in. That's fine. Again, he has that Oscar problem, so he could look to change to Hazard. Again, I'm not sure what he has in the bank, but really I would probably look that if he did want to make a change in the midfield, which I think he probably needs to, because I don't fancy Sessegnon, like I just said. I think he may need to come out. You could leave Oscar alone. I'd perhaps look at selling Giroud to make a change in the midfield. And then he can bring in either Lukaku or Remy up front. Then it'll free him up some cash to play around with in the middle.
Yeah, plenty of fantasy football clinic screenshots being sent in on Twitter. I have another one from Brian Rowe. We'll just do one more.
Yep.
And I'll just read this out live. Phil hasn't even seen this. The first 11: Pantilimon in goal. And then across the back three: Ward, Mertesacker, Johnson. Midfield looks very strong: Ramsey, Morrison, Hazard, Ozil. Up front, Remy, Aguero, Suarez. So up front and the midfield are fine. On his bench, he has Krul in goal, Lucas midfield, and Baker and Rosignol. Aston Villa and Hull City. Rosignol is in defence, so he probably needs to get rid of Pantilimon at some point. Does he?
That's a good looking team,
It is a good looking team. I've just tweeted it from the from the Game On, so you can check it out on the Twitter machine at Game On 2FM.
105 points.
Yeah. Now he doesn't have any money, but he wants to make one or two changes. I mean, looking at it, Keane, Rosignol and Baker or Ward, you could probably talk about strengthening one of those up, but it looks...
Well, yeah, possibly, but we've already talked about Gabidon for a clean sheet this weekend with Crystal Palace, so I mean, I'm actually looking at it here and it looks like a pretty strong team. I'm not quite sure I'd be doing too much with it.
Yeah, I think Lucas will be one that'd worry me, but I mean...
Yeah. I presume he just has Lucas because he's so cheap and, he's not really planning on using him too much, but no. I mean, that midfield and up front is looking very strong.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's going to face the problem that Morrison is suspended this week, which means he is forced to bring in Lucas, and I don't even think he'll start, to be honest. So that's the problem. Really, the change you'd want to be looking at then is selling Lucas, but the big question is just for who. I'm not even sure how much Lucas costs, to give you a suggestion.
4.3. 4.3. It's not a lot to play around with, is it?
It really isn't. Now, I'm doing this on the fly, so bear with me while I just see what I can get you for 4.3 million. Oh, God. Yeah.
Delph. Ward Pros.
Well, he could bring in Oviedo of Everton, but I've already spoken about the fact that he is a defender playing or a midfielder playing in defence, and they're up against Arsenal. So I mean, the fact that you're not going to get a clean sheet, chances are anyway out of that. It might be one to bring in for the week. Ward-Prowse was hauled off before half time.
I think Oviedo is probably the best of those 4.3. Delph got his first goal for Aston Villa last night.
Yes.
But
Kanyas for Swansea might be worth a look. He's only 4.2, but this is only in terms of someone who's going to play. I mean, he's a good player. He's a defensive midfielder, but
he's a great player.
Lucas, as Phil says, isn't going to play. And if you are kind of just looking for someone who's going to get you those 2 points, Kanyas could fit the bill, and he's only 4.2 as well. But I mean, of course, you're not going to get too much for that kind of money. But I wouldn't be too disillusioned with the team he has anyway, to be honest.
Yeah, well, listen, that's probably enough fantasy football clinic. Time to take off the rubber gloves now. Almost time to go, but time to tell you about live time, which is back to its normal time because it's a Saturday from 10:30 to 11:30 on the Twitter machine.
At Fantasy Prem Tips.
At Fantasy Prem Tips. It's as simple as that for all your last minute advice and guidance.
Yeah, and also just to mention that for those of you who haven't liked our Facebook page.
What? Somebody hasn't liked it?
Well, apparently so. Is it you?
What did they say was wrong with it?
Nothing. They just didn't like it.
All right.
Well, yeah. Why haven't you liked it? But yeah, it's facebook.com/FPL transfers. I would suggest that you like the page. We will have some little prize giveaways coming up over the Christmas period that you may be interested in. So do keep an eye on that over the coming weeks. And again, if you want us to have a look at your team next week on the pod in the clinic, send us a screenshot of your team and any questions you have related to it. And if you could, please also let us know if you have any funds in the bank. It just makes the job a little bit easier rather than guessing at it. But yeah, that's about it.
All right, so you have all the Twitters at Fantasy Prem Tips, and at Game on 2FM is where you will find the parent program. Keane, thank you very much for joining us. We shall speak to you over the next couple of weeks. Lots of game weeks coming thick and fast between now and Christmas. Keane will be joining us regularly on the pod. Keane, thank you for that, and have a good game week 15.
Cheers, lads.
Thank you for that. That was good. Enjoyed that. We should both stop scoring so many points, but you know.
I just can't believe I've had to look at you twice in 1 week.
Still surviving.